Welcome, history enthusiasts, to another riveting exploration on the HIST-A.I RY channel. Today we delve into a pivotal moment that shook the course of history, the attack on Pearl Harbor. Join us as we unravel the intricate events, motivations, and consequences surrounding this infamous day. What if I told you that the attack on Pearl Harbor was not a sudden act of aggression, but the culmination of a series of escalating tensions? Let's turn back the clock to the 1930s. Under Emperor Hirohito, Japan, a nation with imperial ambitions, was expanding its sphere of influence in East Asia. The invasion of Manchuria in 1931 marked a significant step in this direction. This was not an act of spontaneous aggression, but a calculated move driven by Japan's desire for resources and territory. The invasion of Manchuria was a clear violation of the principles of the League of Nations, the precursor to the United Nations, and it did not go unnoticed. The world watched, and the League of Nations expressed its dissatisfaction, leading to a significant escalation in tensions. The United States, though distant geographically, was not untouched by Japan's actions. The US had significant economic and political interests in Asia, and Japan's aggressive expansion threatened these. The tension between the two nations began to simmer, setting the stage for future conflicts. In response to Japan's invasion of Manchuria, the League of Nations launched an investigation and issued a report condemning Japan's actions. Japan, refusing to accept the League's judgment, decided to withdraw from the international organization in 1933. This was a clear indication that Japan was willing to defy international norms to achieve its ambitions, thereby isolating itself from the global community. This era, the prelude to tensions, sowed the seeds of the conflict that would eventually lead to the infamous attack on Pearl Harbor. The escalating tensions were not just a series of isolated incidents. They were part of a broader narrative, a complex web of events, motivations, and consequences that would shape the course of the 20th century. As we can see, the seeds of conflict were sown long before the attack on Pearl Harbor. Imagine a powerful nation brought to its knees, not by war, but by economic struggles and a desperate need for resources. In the late 1930s, Japan found itself in such a predicament. As an island nation with limited natural resources, Japan had long depended heavily on imports to fuel its expanding industrial and military machine. However, as Japan's imperial ambitions grew, so did its resource needs: iron, oil, rubber. These were the lifeblood of Japan's burgeoning military and industrial complex, and they were in increasingly short supply. This dependency on imported resources presented a significant challenge. Japan was largely reliant on the United States, among other countries, for these critical supplies. But as Japan's aggression in Asia ramped up, so did the international response. The United States, in particular, took a firm stance, taking note of Japan's aggressive maneuvers in Manchuria and elsewhere. The United States began to apply economic pressure in the form of sanctions and embargoes. The goal was to curb Japan's militaristic ambitions by cutting off the supply of critical resources. The United States halted shipments of airplanes, parts, machine tools, and aviation gasoline. Moreover, in July of 1940, an embargo on scrap iron and steel was imposed, followed by a more devastating embargo on oil in August of 1941. The impact of these sanctions was immediate and severe. Deprived of crucial resources, Japan's military and industrial capabilities were significantly hampered. The oil embargo, in particular, was a crippling blow. Japan was left with just 2 years' worth of oil reserves and faced the grim prospect of running out of fuel for its war machinery. Simultaneously, these sanctions had another, perhaps unintended consequence. They ratcheted up the pressure on Japan's military leaders, who felt increasingly cornered and desperate. This desperation, in turn, would play a significant role in shaping the decisions that led Japan down the path of war. These economic pressures contributed to the mounting tensions between Japan and the United States. The path to war is often paved with failed negotiations. Let's delve into the diplomatic efforts that fell short. In the years between 1940 and 41, diplomatic channels were buzzing with conversations between the United States and Japan. The Hull-Nomura talks, named after U.S. Secretary of State Cordell Hull and Japanese Ambassador Kichisaburo Nomura represented a significant effort to diffuse growing tensions. These discussions were fraught with challenges. The United States, seeking to uphold international law and human rights, insisted that Japan withdraw from China and Indochina. Japan, on the other hand, was unwilling to relinquish its territorial gains. This fundamental difference in objectives created a chasm that seemed increasingly insurmountable. The Hull-Stimson talks, another set of negotiations, were similarly strained. Named after Secretary of State Henry L. Stimson and Ambassador Nomura, these talks aimed to find a balance between Japan's need for resources and America's desire to discourage aggressive expansion. A significant barrier in these talks was a deep-seated mistrust. The United States was wary of Japan's imperial ambitions and viewed their negotiations as a potential stalling tactic. Japan, in contrast, saw the U.S. demands as an infringement on its sovereignty and an attempt to curtail its rise to power. It's important to note, though, that both sides had individuals genuinely seeking peace. Secretary Hull, for instance, was known to have worked tirelessly, hoping to find a solution that would avoid conflict. Ambassador Nomura, too, was a proponent of peace, often going beyond his instructions in an attempt to bridge the gap between the two nations. Yet, despite these efforts, the talks eventually broke down. The fundamental differences proved too great, and the lack of trust too deep. The United States held firm on its stance against aggression, and Japan remained resolute in its pursuit of expansion. In the end, the negotiations served only to highlight the stark contrast in each nation's goals and values. They revealed a widening divide that diplomacy alone could not bridge. Despite these efforts, a peaceful resolution remained elusive. What drives a nation to decide on war? Let's explore the critical moments leading up to Japan's decision. In late 1941, Japan found itself at a crossroads. The economic sanctions imposed by the United States had taken a toll on its military and industrial capabilities. The diplomatic negotiations, despite their best intentions, had failed to resolve the differences between the two nations. The stage was set for an ultimatum. The Japanese war councils, composed of high-ranking military and political figures, were in intense deliberation. They were under the pressure of a ticking clock. The nation's oil reserves were dwindling, and the military might that Japan had built over the years was under threat. The discussions in these war councils were far from unanimous. There were those who advocated for continued negotiations, hoping for a peaceful resolution. But the voices championing war grew louder. They argued that a preemptive strike against the United States would cripple the Pacific Fleet and buy Japan the time it needed to secure the resources it desperately sought. The scales tipped in favor of the latter. The decision for war was not made lightly, but out of a perceived necessity. The belief was that war was the only path to ensure the survival and prosperity of the Japanese Empire. And so, it was decided. A plan was set in motion for a surprise attack. The target, Pearl Harbor, the United States Pacific Fleet headquarters in Hawaii. The date was set for December 7th, 1941. The decision for war was a calculated gamble, made in the hope that a swift victory would force the United States to negotiate on Japan's terms. It was a decision that would have far-reaching consequences, not just for Japan and the United States, but for the entire world. As the Japanese fleet sailed towards Pearl Harbor, the world remained oblivious to the storm that was about to break. The tension was palpable, the stakes higher than ever. Japan was about to awaken a sleeping giant. The stage was set for a day that would live in infamy. The day dawned like any other, but December 7th, 1941 would soon be seared into the annals of history. As the first rays of sun touched the tranquil waters of Pearl Harbor, the Japanese Imperial Navy was maneuvering its aircraft into position. This was not a spur-of-the-moment aggression, but a meticulously planned assault. Months in the making, its execution timed to the minute. The Japanese forces aimed for the element of surprise, and indeed, they achieved it. Their primary targets were the 8 American battleships anchored at the harbor, the backbone of the Pacific Fleet. These naval behemoths were moored in pairs, making them perfect targets for the swooping Japanese bombers. But the attack was not limited to battleships alone. The surrounding airfields and dry docks, strategic points crucial to the Pacific Fleet's operations, were also in the crosshairs. The goal was not just to cripple, but to incapacitate, to ensure the Pacific Fleet wouldn't rise from the ashes anytime soon. The attack was brutal and relentless. Wave after wave of Japanese aircraft rained down torpedoes and bombs, turning the serene harbor into a flaming inferno. The surprise was complete. The devastation, absolute. In less than 2 hours, the surprise attack had left a trail of destruction in its wake. All 8 battleships were damaged, with 4 sunk. 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and an anti-aircraft training ship met similar fates, and nearly 200 aircraft were destroyed. The human cost was even more staggering. Over 2,400 Americans lost their lives that day, with another 1,000 injured. As the smoke began to clear, the scale of the devastation became evident. The harbor was a graveyard of sunken ships and smoldering wreckage. The once mighty Pacific Fleet lay in ruins, its battleships either sunk or severely damaged, its air power decimated. In a matter of hours, the United States Pacific Fleet lay in ruins. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a stunning military success for the Japanese Empire, but it also lit the fuse that would draw the United States into the greatest conflict the world had ever seen. In the wake of the attack, the world held its breath. The United States was now on a war footing. The shockwaves of the Pearl Harbor attack reverberated across the globe. The news of the assault left the world in a state of disbelief, as the perceived invincibility of the United States had been shattered. In response, President Franklin D. Roosevelt took to the airwaves, delivering a speech that would echo through the ages. He declared December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, expressing the nation's shock and resolve in the face of this dire assault. Roosevelt's words galvanized the American people, transforming their reluctance for war into a united front, ready to fight for their homeland. 4 days following the attack, on December 11th, the United States officially declared war on Japan. This marked the country's formal entry into World War II, a conflict that had been raging for over 2 years without American involvement. The sleeping giant was now fully awake, ready to unleash its industrial might and military prowess. But the United States' entry into the war required a shift in strategic focus. The European theater, where Nazi Germany was wreaking havoc, had been the epicenter of the conflict. However, the attack on Pearl Harbor necessitated a significant pivot towards the Pacific. The U.S. had to confront the Japanese Empire, which had been expanding its dominance across East and Southeast Asia. This shift led to the adoption of the island hopping campaign, a strategic military strategy to bypass heavily fortified Japanese-held islands. By capturing and establishing bases on certain key islands, the U.S. aimed to cut off Japanese supply lines, steadily pushing back against their expansive reach. This tactic would prove crucial in the Pacific War, allowing the United States to regain control and push towards victory. The attack on Pearl Harbor had irrevocably altered the course of World War II. It marked the end of American isolation and the beginning of a global crusade against tyranny. The shock, the response, and the strategic pivot to the Pacific all were immediate consequences of this fateful day. They set the stage for a conflict that would redefine the world and our understanding of it. The echoes of Pearl Harbor resonate even today, shaping our world in ways we might not realize. The attack that shook the world has left a lasting impact, with its echoes reverberating through the annals of history. In the heart of Pearl Harbor, the USS Arizona Memorial stands as a solemn reminder of the lives lost on that fateful day. It's a place of reflection, where one can ponder the sacrifices made and the ripple effects that continue to shape our world. This memorial, a symbol of resilience and remembrance, draws millions of visitors each year, silently narrating a tale of tragedy and triumph. But the impact of Pearl Harbor extends beyond stone memorials. It fundamentally transformed the United States, catalyzing its evolution from a nation with isolationist tendencies to a global superpower. The attack spurred massive military expansion and technological innovation, propelling the United States to the forefront of world affairs. This shift was not transient, but rather a permanent metamorphosis that would redefine the nation's role on the global stage. In the wake of the attack, the United States found itself entwined in a global conflict that would reshape the political landscape of the world. The end of World War II saw the emergence of two superpowers, the United States, and the Soviet Union, setting the stage for the Cold War and the subsequent geopolitical chess game that would span decades. Moreover, the legacy of Pearl Harbor had a profound impact on shaping diplomatic relations. It instilled a deep-seated sense of caution and vigilance, influencing foreign policies and defense strategies. It also led to the establishment of international bodies, like the United Nations, aiming to prevent such devastating conflicts in the future. The ripples of Pearl Harbor continue to impact our world, reminding us of the profound significance of this event. As we navigate the complexities of our modern world, the lessons of Pearl Harbor serve as a beacon, guiding us towards a future where peace and diplomacy prevail over conflict and war. So, was Pearl Harbor merely a military blunder, or was it a pivotal moment in world history? As we've explored, the events leading to and following the attack on Pearl Harbor had far-reaching implications. This was not merely a military incident, but a turning point that forever altered the trajectory of the 20th century. The repercussions of Pearl Harbor were felt not just in the immediate aftermath, but continue to reverberate today. The attack led to the United States' entry into World War II, shifting the global balance and setting the stage for America's emergence as a superpower. It also shaped the post-war world, influencing diplomatic relations and geopolitical strategies for decades to come. Pearl Harbor, therefore, is a stark reminder of the profound impact a single event can have on the course of history. Its legacy persists, serving as a poignant lesson about the consequences of conflict and the enduring power of peace. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you found this exploration insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more historical journeys. Until next time, this has been the HIST-A.I RY channel, signing off from the pages of history.